I had a strawberry bed that produced exactly 7 berries last June. 7. I counted them. They were the size of my thumbnail and tasted like slightly sweetened cardboard. Not even good cardboard. The kind of cardboard that gets left out in the rain and then dries into a sad, fibrous mat. I was ready to rip the whole thing out and plant more tomatoes instead. At least tomatoes have the decency to produce something, even in a bad year. Then my neighbor, a woman named Mrs. Kowalska, who has been growing food on this street since before I was born, walked past my pathetic little patch. She moves slowly now with a cane, but her eyes miss nothing. She looked at my strawberries for maybe 3 seconds. Not a long diagnostic stare. Just a quick glance, the kind a mechanic gives an engine before telling you exactly what is wrong. She said 4 words that changed everything. You are starving them. Not in spring, when every gardening book tells you to fertilize. Right now. In the fall. That was 3 years ago. Last June, I filled a 5-gallon bucket with strawberries every 3 days for almost a month. I stopped counting individual berries by the 2nd week because it was pointless. I was picking by weight, and I am going to show you exactly what she told me to do. Because the reason most strawberry beds limp along producing a handful of sad little fruits is not bad luck or bad weather. It is bad timing, and the fix costs less than a single coffee from a vending machine. Let me just tell you right now, because I know exactly what you might be thinking. You are probably looking at your strawberry patch, or your planter, or that little pot on the balcony, and you are thinking, the season is over. The leaves are getting tired, maybe a little brown around the edges, maybe some spots you have been trying not to worry about. Time to let them go to sleep and deal with them next April. Maybe you will throw some mulch on top if you get around to it. Maybe you will just let the snow cover them and call it good enough. I completely understand that approach. I thought exactly the same way for the first 5 years I tried to grow strawberries. I would tuck them in with a little straw, maybe whisper some encouraging words, and then walk away. I would spend the winter ordering seed catalogs and planning my spring fertilization strategy, convinced that next year would be different if I just found the right product. And every spring they would come back. They would send out leaves. They would put out a few flowers. And I would get my 7 berries. Maybe 8 if I was lucky. What I did not understand, what almost nobody talks about in those cheerful little garden center handouts with their glossy photos and their one-size-fits-all feeding schedules, is that the strawberry harvest you get next June is not decided in April or May. It is decided right now. In the fall, the plants are not just shutting down for winter like a bear going into hibernation. They are making a decision about how much energy they can store, how many flower buds they can afford to create, and ultimately, how many berries you are going to be eating next summer. And if you do not intervene, if you just let them coast into dormancy on whatever scraps they have left in the soil, they will make the safest, most conservative decision possible. They will survive. They always survive. That is what plants do. They are survival machines. But they will not explode. They will not shower you with abundance. They will give you 7 berries and a look of quiet disappointment that you will feel in your soul when you see the prices at the farmer's market. Do you know that feeling? That specific, sinking feeling when you walk past a garden center in May, and you see those hanging baskets absolutely dripping with strawberries. The ones that look like someone photoshopped them onto the plant. Perfect red cones cascading over the sides of the pot, leaves so dark green they are almost blue, the whole display looking like it belongs on the cover of a magazine that hates you personally. And you look at your own patch, which you have watered and weeded and worried over, which you have talked to and sung to and possibly threatened, and you see maybe a dozen green nubs that may or may not ever turn red. Some of them are already getting nibbled by something you cannot identify. Some of them are misshapen, like little green brains. And you think, what am I doing wrong? What secret product are they using? Is it the variety? Is it the soil? Is it me? I know that feeling all too well. I have stood in that exact spot, holding a sad little berry between my fingers, wondering if I should just give up and pave the whole thing over. And for years I chased the wrong solutions. I added more compost in the spring, dark and rich and smelling of earth. I tried liquid seaweed, which stained my hands green and made my watering can smell like a low tide. I bought a very expensive bag of organic berry fertilizer with a picture of a strawberry on it that was roughly the size of a softball, a picture that I now realize was a cruel and deliberate lie. I even tried one of those moisture meter gadgets, the kind with the little needle and the dial, because I convinced myself I must be watering wrong. Maybe too much, maybe too little, maybe at the wrong time of day. I drove myself half crazy with it. None of it moved the needle. None of it produced more than a marginal improvement. Because I was feeding them at the wrong time. It would be like an athlete eating a huge meal 5 minutes before the race, instead of training and building muscle for months beforehand. The spring feeding helps a little, I will grant that. The plant appreciates the gesture. But the plant is already committed by then. The flower buds, the tiny embryonic clusters that will become your berries, they form inside the crown of the plant in the shortening days of autumn. They are microscopic in October. You cannot see them without a magnifying glass and a very sharp knife. But they are there, being built cell by cell, and the quality of that construction depends entirely on what resources are available. If the plant does not have the resources to build those buds robustly, you get fewer flowers. Fewer flowers, fewer berries. It is brutally simple. It is not mysterious. It is arithmetic. Now, before I tell you what misses, Kowalska told me, let me walk you through the usual advice you will find online. Because some of it is not just wrong. Some of it is actively harmful, and it gets repeated so often that it has hardened into conventional wisdom. The kind of thing people say to each other over the fence with great confidence while both of their strawberry beds are failing. The first thing you will see is the recommendation to cut all the leaves off in fall. Just mow them down to the crown, they say. Clean the bed up. Get rid of all that old foliage that might harbor disease. It looks tidy. It feels productive. I tried this. I tried it on half my bed 1 year to compare, a controlled experiment because I am that kind of person. The shorn half produced about 30% fewer berries the following spring, and took almost 3 extra weeks to really get going. The leaves are the solar panels. Even in fall, even when they look a little ragged and tired, even when they have some spots and some brown edges, they are still photosynthesizing. They are still catching the low autumn sunlight and pumping sugar down into the crown and roots for storage. That sugar is the fuel for next year's growth. Cutting the leaves off early is like telling someone to save up for retirement and then firing them in October. Let the leaves do their job until they are fully brown and flattened by frost. The plant will tell you when it is done with them. The leaf will yellow, then brown, then detach with a gentle tug. You do not need to decide. You do not need to intervene. Just wait. The second piece of advice you will hear, and this one sounds so logical that I fell for it hard, is to pile on a thick layer of manure or rich compost in the fall. This sounds right. Feed them up for winter. Give them a big meal to carry them through the cold months. The problem is nitrogen. Manure and fresh compost are loaded with nitrogen. That is what makes them such great soil amendments in the spring, when you want a burst of green growth. But in the fall, a big nitrogen hit tells the plant to push out new, tender, leafy growth. That is the exact opposite of what you want. You want the plant to slow down, harden off, and focus on root and crown storage. You want it to get tough, not tender. A flush of soft, new leaves in October is a gift to every frost and fungal disease in the neighborhood. It is like sending out engraved invitations. I lost 6 plants 1 year to a slimy, gray rot that set in after an early cold snap hit the lush growth I had so proudly encouraged with a top dressing of well-rotted horse manure. I remember going out after the first hard freeze and seeing those leaves, which had been so green and vigorous just days before, now collapsed into a mushy, foul-smelling mat. The plants that did not get the manure just sat there, compact and tough, their leaves tinged with red from the cold and sailed right through. They looked like they were hunkering down. The others looked like they had given up. The difference was stark, and it was entirely my fault. The third, and this one makes me honestly kind of angry because it gets repeated so often by people who should know better, is the advice to just ignore them. Strawberries are tough. They do not need anything. They are basically weeds. Just let them be. I have heard this from garden bloggers. I have heard it from nursery workers. I have heard it from people whose gardens I have seen with my own eyes, and who, I now realize, have never grown a truly productive strawberry bed in their lives. Strawberries are tough, that part is true. They are descended from woodland edge plants that survive in pretty marginal conditions, the kind of places where they get shaded out by trees and have to fight for every scrap of nutrient. They can hang on. They can persist. But surviving and producing a massive crop of large, sweet, juicy berries are two completely different biological projects. A plant that is just surviving will put out a few small fruits to hopefully make some seeds and call it a year. It has done its evolutionary duty. It has reproduced. A plant that is truly thriving, a plant that has deep reserves of carbohydrates and a full suite of micronutrients stored in its roots and crown. That plant will throw up thick, strong flower stalks with multiple large blossoms. It will set fruit that has enough cell structure to swell with sugar and water, instead of turning into those hard little pebbles that never seem to ripen properly no matter how long you leave them on the plant. Ignoring them in fall gives you survival mode. It gives you the bare minimum. What I am about to show you gives you thriving mode. It gives you abundance mode. It gives you the kind of harvest that makes you understand why people grow their own food in the first place. So there I was, standing next to Mrs. Kowalska, looking at my 7 sad berries. The sun was warm, the bees were buzzing in her garden next door, and I could smell the ripe fruit hanging from her plants through the fence. She had just told me I was starving them. I asked her what she used. Some kind of special European formula passed down through generations. A secret compost tea brewed in a specific kind of clay pot. An expensive imported mineral dust from a volcanic island. She laughed, not at me, but in that way that older gardeners do when they realize how complicated you have been making something very simple. It is a kind laugh, but it is also a laugh that says, "Oh, you modern gardeners with your products and your schedules and your gadgets." She said she used one thing, one single ingredient that she applied exactly once, at exactly the right time. She said her mother had done it, and her grandmother before that, back in a village in eastern Poland where the strawberries were famous for being the sweetest in the entire region. The kind of strawberries people would travel to buy and then talk about all winter. And then she told me what it was. Hand on heart, I did not believe her at first. It sounded too simple. It sounded like one of those old wives' tales that are lovely stories, passed down with affection, but do not actually do anything when you test them. Like planting by the moon phases or burying a fish under your tomatoes. I was skeptical, but I trusted her because her garden was a jungle of abundance, a place where everything grew with a kind of effortless vigor that made my own efforts look like a sad science experiment. Her tomato plants were taller than me. Her cucumbers cascaded over their trellis in a green waterfall. Her strawberries, well, I could see them from where I was standing, and they were everything I wanted mine to be. My garden, by contrast, was a museum of agricultural disappointment. So I did it. I did what she told me to do, exactly as she described, at the time she specified. And the next summer, I had to start giving strawberries away to neighbors because we could not eat them fast enough. I was leaving bags of them on doorsteps like some kind of fruit bandit. The secret ingredient is wood ash. Plain gray, powdery wood ash from a clean fire. That is it. Not a special imported volcanic ash. Not an expensive mined mineral supplement with a fancy label and a markup that would make you wince. Just the stuff you sweep out of your fireplace or your fire pit. The stuff you probably throw in the trash or maybe scatter vaguely around the garden without much thought. And I know what you are thinking right now. I can almost hear it. Probably that wood ash is just a folk remedy, one of those things Grandpa did because Grandpa did it, with no real science behind it. Or that it is too alkaline and will ruin your soil, burn your plants, and leave you with a barren patch where your strawberries used to be. Or that it cannot possibly make that much difference, that the idea of fireplace ashes transforming a struggling strawberry bed into a productive powerhouse is just too neat, too convenient, too good to be true. I thought all of those things. I stood there with those exact doubts running through my head while Mrs. Kowalska looked at me with her calm, knowing expression. Let me walk you through why it works, and then I will tell you exactly how to apply it so you do not mess it up. Because there is a right way and a wrong way, and the wrong way can indeed cause problems. The wrong way can set you back. But the right way, the way I am about to show you, is one of the simplest and most effective things you will ever do in your garden. Wood ash is, chemically speaking, a complex mineral cocktail. The carbon has burned off, released into the air as carbon dioxide. What is left behind is the mineral skeleton of the tree, everything the tree pulled up from deep in the soil over decades of growth. Trees are miners. Their roots go down into the subsoil, into the bedrock, into places your garden fork will never reach, and they extract minerals. Those minerals are deposited in the wood. When you burn that wood, you are left with a concentrated, highly available form of those minerals. The biggest component is calcium carbonate, the same stuff as agricultural lime. This is what makes it alkaline, but it also contains potassium in a highly soluble form, which is the K in that NPK ratio on every fertilizer bag you have ever bought. Potassium is absolutely critical for fruit production. It regulates water movement in the plant, controlling how fluids flow through the tissues. It activates enzymes that build sugars and starches, which is what makes a strawberry taste like a strawberry instead of like damp cotton. And it is directly involved in the formation of flower buds, the very process that is happening inside the crown of your plants right now, in the fall, while you are thinking about putting the garden to bed. When you apply wood ash in the fall, the potassium dissolves slowly over the winter months with rain and snow melt, moving down into the root zone exactly when the plant is building its reserves. It is a release capsule, and the timing is perfect. By spring, it is perfectly positioned for the plant to use, right there in the root zone, ready to be taken up the moment the soil warms and the roots wake up. And here is the part that really sold me, the part that made me go from skeptical to evangelical. Wood ash also contains a whole suite of trace elements: magnesium, phosphorus, boron, zinc, manganese, copper. These are the micronutrients that are often completely depleted in garden soils, especially soils that have been cultivated for years without being replenished. They are like the vitamins in our own diet. You can eat all the calories in the world, all the nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, but without those tiny amounts of vitamins, your body does not function properly. You get sluggish. You get sick. A strawberry plant without boron, for example, produces misshapen, nubby fruit. The pollen tubes do not grow correctly, so the flower does not get pollinated evenly, and the berry develops with weird indentations and lumps. I used to get berries that looked like little wrinkled brains, and I thought it was a pollination problem that I did not have enough bees. I put up bee houses. I planted flowers. It did not help. After one fall application of wood ash, the next year's berries were perfectly conical and symmetrical, like they had come out of a mold. I am not saying it was a miracle. I am saying it was a mineral deficiency I did not know I had, solved by a waste product I was throwing in the trash. I was literally discarding the solution to my problem, and then spending money on products that did not address the root cause. Now let me give you the exact recipe. Because this is not a case of just dumping a bucket of ash on your plants and walking away. That is how you cause problems. That is how people burn their plants and then tell everyone that wood ash is dangerous. There is a specific rate, a specific method, and a specific list of things you must never do. I want you to pay attention here because the details matter. First, the source of the ash matters enormously. It must be clean wood ash. That means ash from untreated lumber, branches, logs, or natural wood scraps. No pressure-treated wood, which contains copper and arsenic compounds that you do not want anywhere near your food. No painted wood, which can contain lead and other heavy metals. No plywood, no particle board, no OSB, nothing that has glues and resins holding it together. No charcoal briquettes, which are often loaded with lighter fluid, binders, and other chemicals. Those contain things that will poison your soil and end up in your berries. No ash from a fireplace where you also burned glossy paper, cardboard with colored printing, wrapping paper with metallic inks, or plastic of any kind. Those inks and coatings contain compounds that become toxic when burned and concentrated in the ash. If you are not sure, do not use it. It is not worth the risk. The best ash comes from a clean outdoor fire pit where you have burned only fallen branches or split firewood, nothing else. Hardwood ash from oak, maple, hickory, beech, or fruit trees is richer in potassium and minerals than softwood ash from pine or fir. Hardwood trees grow more slowly and accumulate more minerals in their wood. But softwood ash is still perfectly fine if that is what you have. Use what you have. The key is that it is clean. The rate. This is the part where people get nervous, and I want you to pay close attention. For established strawberry plants that have been in the ground for at least one full growing season, you will apply roughly 1/2 cup of wood ash per plant. That is about 4 ounces by volume, or a generous handful. Not a heaping handful. Not a double handful. A measured, restrained handful. If you are applying to a whole bed, the rate is about 1 pound of ash per 20 square feet of bed. That is roughly a coffee can full spread over an area the size of a standard interior door. Do not exceed this rate. I am saying this again because it is important. More is not better. Wood ash is alkaline, and strawberries prefer slightly acidic soil, somewhere in the range of 5.5 to 6.5 pH. A light application in the fall gives the soil all winter to buffer and integrate the minerals. The freeze-thaw cycles, the rain, the snow, the activity of soil microbes, all of these things work together to incorporate that ash gently. A heavy application can spike the pH suddenly and lock up other nutrients, particularly iron and manganese, which become unavailable to plants in alkaline conditions. I made this mistake once in my second year when I got overconfident. I applied a thick gray blanket, a visible layer of ash across the entire bed, because I figured if a little was good, a lot would be amazing. The plants the next spring were stunted and yellowish, with pale leaves and weak growth, classic signs of nutrient lockout from high pH. They looked sick. They looked worse than they had before I ever started using ash. It took a full year to correct, a full year of adding sulfur and compost and waiting for the soil chemistry to rebalance. So measure, be restrained. This is a supplement, not a soil replacement. It is a pinch of salt in a recipe, not the main ingredient. The timing. You want to apply the ash after the plants have stopped producing fruit, and after the first light frosts have started to slow down growth, but before the ground freezes solid. For most of us in the northern hemisphere, that is sometime in October or November. The leaves should still be mostly green or just starting to discolor, maybe showing some red or purple at the edges, that autumn blush that strawberries get when the nights turn cold. If you wait until the plants are fully brown and dormant, until they look dead, you have missed some of the window for potassium uptake. The roots are still active, but they are slowing down, and you want to give those minerals time to dissolve and move into the root zone before everything shuts down completely. If you apply it while the weather is still warm and the plants are actively growing, you risk pushing a flush of soft growth that will get hammered by frost. The sweet spot is that quiet, cool period when the plant has essentially stopped making new leaves, but the roots are still active, still respiring, still taking up nutrients. The soil is cold to the touch, but not frozen. The metabolic machinery is still running underground, just at a slower pace. That is your window. That is when you want to be out there with your bucket of ash. The method. Put the ash in a bucket. Wear gloves if you want, though it is not corrosive. It is just dusty, and it can dry out your skin if you handle a lot of it. Walk to your strawberry bed. Take a small handful of ash and sprinkle it evenly around the base of each plant. You want a light, dusty ring, not a pile. Think of dusting a cake with powdered sugar, that gentle, even dusting. Not shoveling snow. Not dumping a mound. Keep the ash a couple of inches away from the crown of the plant itself. The crown is that central nub where the leaves emerge, the heart of the plant. Ash piled directly against the crown can hold moisture against the tissue and cause rot over the winter, especially in wet climates. It can also be too concentrated and cause a kind of chemical burn on the tender new growth that will emerge in spring. So give the crown some space. After you have sprinkled the ash, take a hand cultivator or just your fingers and lightly scratch it into the top half-inch of soil. You are not tilling. You are not digging. You are just breaking the surface tension, mixing the ash with the very top layer of soil so it does not blow away in the first stiff breeze. Wood ash is light, and a strong wind can carry it off before it has a chance to settle. Then water it in lightly, just enough to settle the ash and start the slow process of dissolving those minerals into the soil solution. You do not need to flood it. A gentle sprinkle from a watering can or a brief pass with a hose on a soft setting is plenty. If rain is forecast in the next day or two, you can skip the watering. Let nature do it. After that, you can put on your winter mulch. Straw, shredded leaves, pine needles, whatever you normally use to protect your plants from the worst of the cold. The ash will work its way down through the soil profile over the winter, carried by water and the movement of soil organisms, and by spring, it will be fully integrated and available to the roots. Now let me address the question I know is forming in your mind, because it was the first thing I asked Mrs. Kowalska. What if I do not have a fireplace or a fire pit? What if I live in an apartment, or a city where open burning is not allowed, or a warm climate where I never build a fire? What if I cannot get wood ash? Is there a substitute? The answer is yes, but it is not quite as elegant or as free. You can use a commercial potassium supplement, often sold as sulfate of potash or langbeinite. Sulfate of potash is a mined mineral, potassium sulfate, that provides potassium and sulfur. Langbeinite is another mined mineral that provides potassium, magnesium, and sulfur. They are more concentrated than wood ash, so you need even less. About 1 tablespoon per plant, scratched in, same timing, same method. They are also pH neutral, so they are a safer choice if your soil is already on the alkaline side, if you have done a soil test and your pH is above 7. They will not shift the pH at all. But they cost money. Not a lot of money. A 5-pound bag of sulfate of potash costs about $12 and will last a home gardener several seasons. But it is not free, and there is something deeply satisfying about taking a waste product from your own land, something you were going to throw away, and turning it into the fuel for next year's harvest. It closes a loop. It feels right in a way that opening a plastic bag of mined minerals does not. It feels like you are participating in the cycle, rather than just purchasing an input. I want to tell you about the science behind why this fall application matters so much, because understanding the mechanism is what turns this from a random tip into a permanent practice. It is what makes you remember to do it year after year instead of trying it once and then forgetting. Inside the crown of a strawberry plant, as the days get shorter and the temperatures drop, a hormonal shift occurs. The plant senses the changing photoperiod through pigments in its leaves. It knows winter is coming. It stops producing gibberellins, which are growth hormones that push vegetative expansion, the hormones that tell the plant to make more leaves and stems. It starts producing abscisic acid, which triggers dormancy preparations, slowing down metabolism and hardening off tissues. During this transition, while the plant is shifting gears, it is also forming the primordia, the microscopic beginnings of next year's flower clusters. These are tiny groups of undifferentiated cells inside the crown that will, over the winter, develop into the structures that become flowers. This process is energy-intensive. It requires carbohydrates, which the plant has been storing in its roots and crown all summer, sugars produced by those leaves and sent down for safekeeping. But it also requires a specific balance of nutrients, particularly potassium and phosphorus, to actually construct those primordia into viable, robust flower buds. Potassium is like the foreman on the construction site. It directs the movement of materials. It ensures that the sugars and amino acids get where they need to go. If potassium is limiting, the plant will still form primordia. It will not just give up and die. It will just form fewer of them, and they will be less robust, less developed, less capable of producing a large, well-formed fruit. You will get flowers, but they will be smaller, with fewer pistils, which means smaller berries with a higher chance of being misshapen or failing to pollinate properly. By supplying that potassium in the fall, right when the hormonal shift is happening and the primordia are being built, you are giving the plant the raw material it needs to build the maximum number of high-quality flower buds. It is like giving a builder enough bricks to build a house instead of a shed. The builder is already there, ready to work. The plans are drawn. The foundation is poured. You are just making sure he does not run out of materials halfway through and have to scale back the project. There is another layer to this that I discovered by accident in my second year of using wood ash. I noticed that the plants I had treated in the fall were not only more productive, they were also noticeably healthier. Fewer leaf spots, less powdery mildew, less of that general raggedness that strawberries often get by midsummer when the heat and humidity really set in. The leaves stayed green and functional longer into the season. The plants just looked more robust, like they had more reserves to draw on when conditions got tough. I started digging into why, reading old agricultural extension bulletins and plant physiology textbooks, and it turns out that potassium plays a critical role in plant immune function. It regulates the opening and closing of stomata, the tiny pores in the leaves through which the plant breathes and exchanges gases. When potassium is adequate, the stomata open and close promptly in response to conditions, and the plant can manage water stress without panicking. It can keep its tissues turgid and healthy. When potassium is low, the stomata get sluggish. They do not close properly when the plant is stressed, and the plant loses water control. It wilts more easily, and a wilted, stressed plant is more susceptible to fungal pathogens that take advantage of weakened tissue. The wood ash was not just feeding the fruit. It was toughening up the whole plant against the diseases that usually take it down by August. I had been spraying baking soda and neem oil and all sorts of things trying to keep my plants clean, trying to fight the symptoms. The real solution was building their internal resilience months before the disease pressure even started, giving them the nutritional foundation to defend themselves. Let me give you a few hard-earned cautions, things I learned the hard way so you do not have to. Do not use wood ash on first-year plants that you just put in the ground this season. They are still establishing their root systems, still getting their feet under them, and they are more sensitive to pH shifts. Their root systems are small and shallow, and they do not have the buffering capacity of an established plant. Let them get through their first winter with just a light mulch and maybe a very gentle organic fertilizer, something mild like a sprinkle of compost. Start the ash regimen in their second fall, once they have proven they can handle your particular soil and climate, once they have built up some reserves and some root mass. Do not use wood ash if your soil is already alkaline. If you live in an area with naturally high pH soil, like many parts of the arid West, or areas over limestone bedrock, adding ash could push you into problem territory. A simple soil pH test, which costs about $10 at any garden center or online, will tell you where you stand. It is a little kit with a test tube and some powder, and it takes 5 minutes. If your pH is above 7.5, skip the ash and use sulfate of potash instead. If your pH is between 6 and 7, which is ideal for strawberries, the light ash application will be perfectly fine. If your pH is below 6, the ash will actually help bring it up into the sweet spot while also providing potassium. It is a 2-for-1 deal. You are correcting a pH problem and a potassium deficiency at the same time. Do not apply wood ash at the same time as a nitrogen fertilizer. The calcium in the ash can react with nitrogen, particularly ammonium forms of nitrogen, and cause it to volatilize into the air as ammonia gas. You literally lose your nitrogen to the atmosphere. You can sometimes smell it, a sharp, acrid smell like cleaning products. That is your fertilizer disappearing. If you feel you must add some nitrogen in the fall, which I do not recommend for the reasons I already explained, do it at least 2 weeks apart from the ash application. Give the soil time to process one before adding the other. Do not apply wood ash to blueberry bushes or other acid-loving plants. Blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, camellias, they need acidic soil, and ash will make them very unhappy. They will show their displeasure with yellow leaves and stunted growth. Strawberries are not in that category. They like things slightly acidic to neutral, and they tolerate the mild alkalinity of a light ash application just fine. They are more adaptable than people give them credit for. I want to share a specific memory from that first successful spring, after I started using fall wood ash. It was early June, one of those perfect mornings where the air is still cool, but the sun has some warmth in it, and the whole garden is glistening with dew. I walked out with my coffee, expecting to see the usual modest flush of berries starting to ripen, maybe a dozen or so showing some color. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. I literally stopped walking and just stared. The plants were absolutely loaded. I mean clusters of berries hanging down like grapes, so heavy they were pulling the stems toward the ground. There were berries in every stage, from hard green nubs to blushing pink to deep, glossy red. The leaves were dark green and thick, almost leathery, standing up strong instead of flopping on the ground like they usually did by that point in the season. They looked like different plants. They looked like the plants in the garden center photos, the ones I had assumed were fake or grown in some kind of controlled laboratory conditions. I called Mrs. Kowalska. I actually went inside and called her on the phone, which I almost never do because I wanted her to see. She came over, walking slowly with her cane, and looked at the bed. She nodded once, a single, slow nod of confirmation. She said, "Now you understand." Then she told me something I have never forgotten. She said that in her village, they used to say that a strawberry plant is a promise. The promise you make to it in the fall, it keeps to you in the summer. It is a little poetic, I know, but it is also literally, biochemically true. The promise you make by providing those minerals in October, by taking the time to walk out there with your bucket of ash and your careful measurements, is repaid in June with fruit. Break the promise, ignore the plant when it is quietly asking for what it needs, and you get 7 berries. 7 sad, cardboard-tasting berries that make you want to give up. So here is your checklist. Sometime in the next few weeks, when the air is crisp and the leaves are thinking about turning, when you can see your breath in the morning and the sun is setting noticeably earlier, gather your materials. Clean wood ash screened if it is chunky, stored dry in a bucket. Or a bag of sulfate of potash if ash is not available. A measuring cup, or just your hand calibrated to about a half cup. A hand cultivator or a stick. A hose or a watering can. Walk out to your strawberry bed. For each plant, sprinkle your half cup of ash in a ring around the crown. Scratch it in lightly, just enough to mix it with the surface soil. Water it in gently. Mulch over the top with straw or leaves. Then walk away. Let the winter do the work. Let the rain and the snow and the slow, invisible crawl of soil microbes break down those minerals and carry them to the roots. When spring comes, do not do anything different. Do not add extra fertilizer. Do not fuss. Do not second-guess yourself. Just watch. Watch the thick, sturdy flower stalks push up through the mulch, thicker than you remember from previous years. Watch the bees go to work on the abundant blossoms, more blossoms than you have ever seen on your plants. Watch the berries swell day after day, from green to white to pink to red, until the branches are bending under the weight. And when you are out there picking bowl after bowl of deep red, perfectly formed strawberries, warm from the sun and so sweet they taste like jam before you even cook them, remember that this all started with a handful of gray dust in the quiet of autumn. That is the whole idea. The best solutions are simple, ancient, and hidden in plain sight, overlooked because they cannot be bottled and sold for a profit. And now you are one of the people who knows. You are part of the chain, the lineage of gardeners who understand that the real work happens in the fall, in the quiet, when no one is watching. Share that knowledge. Tell your neighbors. Tell the person at the garden center who looks disappointed in their strawberry harvest. The world needs more strawberries. And now you know exactly how to make that happen.